Hey dudes, it's Lerald. Earlier today, GGG dropped the big PoE Patch 3.26 reveal, and I have some thoughts on it. There's some really cool looking new in-game farm content, also some like new pinnacle bosses and a new story quest line. From Mark's mouth to our ears, this is going to be the juiciest in-game map farming content of all time in PoE 1, which is very exciting. There's also a very significant meta shakeup taking place, and I think there are a lot of potential skills and build archetypes that could rise up to fill the void left behind by Lightning Strike, Molten Strike, and Frost Blades. So let's just kind of go ahead and get into it. So it's the Secrets of the Atlas expansion. It is kind of built around memory threads. I'd written a whole bunch of thoughts here, and ultimately I don't want to just repeat everything that Mark said in the reveal, right? But it does seem like it's mostly built around in-game maps. You venture through a map and then you'll stumble onto these memory threads and you interact with them, and then you can talk to Egan Cassera, Zana's sister Egan, outside of the map, and he will open up a map, or actually a series of maps. It's kind of based on the Atlas memory system that existed, I think, since patch 3.19. That was Calandra League. But then it also sort of works mechanically in the maps like Sentinel League and Delirium Mirrors. So the thing here, though, is that these aren't your maps. These aren't your spam running whatever dunes a million times, and then you find one of these memory threads and you attach it to whatever set of maps. You'll run those through Egan rather than being itemized maps that you drop initially. My understanding is that once you've done the whole storyline, finished all of the storyline versions of the in-game bosses, then you will start getting itemized maps that are these memory maps to drop. Now, what's interesting here is that this seems like it isn't replacing the Eater and Exarch storyline that you use to unlock your Watchstones, Voidstones, whatever they are. All of that stuff is still in place. So this is just extra content that's being added on top of the existing in-game. It's just a new extra storyline rather than a replacement like the last couple of times that they've done a big of the Atlas patch. Usually these expansion level patches of the Atlases, or something, Conquerors of the Atlas, War for the Atlas, that sort of thing, they replace the old storyline. And this time Mark even said in the post reveal Q&A with Ziggy D that they didn't want to remove the Eater and Exarch in-game because patch 3.25 is gone for almost a year. They wanted something for returning players to kind of come back and basically have a familiar handhold to cling on to. Now, with that being said, looking at the way that they kind of revealed how this works in the maps, you're kind of running around, and it's sort of like Sentinel, where you're pressing a button and empowering monsters, and they gave a bunch of examples, but the one that really spoke to me was one that converts all the weapons and armor drops from the monsters into currency and scarabs, and that one just really felt like Sentinel, super duper like Sentinel. And so with that in mind, I think in preparing for the league, you really want to play builds, especially as league starters, that are able to be super tanky and live while weaving around a bunch of packs. You're zipping in between a bunch of packs and not instantly killing everything on the screen without being able to stop yourself, and also not instantly dying. Now, for what it's worth, I think that there's a huge range of builds that fit that category, but they do have kind of a Toxic Rain-ish looking character in here, which is kind of the direction I'm leaning. Toxic Rain has the Mirage Archer, so you're not totally able to turn off your damage, but it's pretty good at turning off, you just don't attack, and then you won't really kill that much. Righteous Fire, for example, pretty bad for this mechanic. So all right, there's a bunch more other stuff in here, right? I'm gonna kind of move past it just because I don't want to go over this for too long. But they did also add in the Mercenaries of Trarthus. That's the actual challenge league. That's the league mechanic, as opposed to the big expansion level mechanic of the Secrets of the Atlas, which sort of seems like this expansion is going to be kind of a multi-patch rollout. We're getting part of it now in 3.26. We're getting the full expansion, but then they're going to kind of build on this storyline in 3.27 and maybe even 3.28. My thinking is that they'll probably transition from the Eater and Exarch storyline and into I would say kind of the setup to the PoE 2 storyline. We'll see, right? In terms of the league, it is the Mercenaries of Trarthus. It's definitely going to be called Mercenary League, the solid name, and these are basically just Diablo 2 mercenaries, except instead of hiring them in town, you will encounter them out in the world. They have a handful of different archetypes, strength, int, pure int dex, you know, all the kind of stuff that you can have as a player character. And they are kind of fully built, like they have a whole skill set with skill gems and support gems and a bunch of different items. And you basically, when you stumble on them, you can either like duel them and then hire them to fight for you, or duel them to get one of their pieces of gear, or just duel them for their currency. Cool. I like all of this. I think the idea of having them be like an aura bot, there was one in here that had a really nice set of auras. This one, not so much. Like Wrath, that's okay. But there was one in here, I think it's this last one. Either way, one of these guys that they had in here had like Grace and Haste and just like a whole oh, it's this one right here. Yeah, Grace and Haste and Rain of Arrows. And it was just like a full-on, very useful support archer. I really liked the idea here, and I could definitely see this being the kind of thing that you actually construct a build around hiring one of these mercenaries. With that being said, they did say that they're not able to level up with you. So like if you're using them during the campaign, you're going to need to kind of recruit a new guy, probably like every act or two. But they're revivable for gold, right? So if they die in your map, it's fine. You just go outside the map and revive them. Before the next map, I think you can't bring them back into a map that they've already died in. There's also just like some kind of cool uniques, like this one in particular really stuck out to me. Wine of the Prophet, giving you a random divination card based buff for 20 seconds. This just screamed Pathfinder. This was like the only thing in the entire reveal that I saw, and I was like, Pathfinder. But this one really yelled Pathfinder at me, the ability to just have like a rotating collection of potentially super strong divination card based buffs, you know, stuff like Headhunter buff, or, you know, I don't know what they all are, but I'm definitely excited to find out. And yeah, I think that really is kind of making me laser in on playing Toxic Rain Pathfinder, even though there's some other stuff I'm maybe a little concerned about. All right, there were a couple of other things as well. They said King's March is going core. I'm not super thrilled about that. It's okay. I think the one positive about King's March is that we're not going to have to rebuild any of it, and it was very good in terms of making currency like efficiently. So I think I might wind up actually speccing into it and using it, even though I'm a little King's Marched out. Supposedly the shipping and all of the stuff in the town is quite a lot slower now and proportionally more rewarding to compensate. So it's like less micromanagement intensive, but still very rewarding for your time, which actually sounds pretty good. There's also a betrayal rework that I'm really excited about. I actually might wind up wanting to do betrayal at the start of this league rather than like feeling like I have to. Katarina's being itemized, which is great. You're also like getting these new All Flame Embers, well, old All Flame Embers from Katarina, which is interesting. I don't know if they'll be good or not. They're kind of, they seem like they're going to be rare to the point where they may not be a huge deal for players, but they might wind up being like high value scarabs. So that was kind of the main big things from the patch that weren't in like just patch note specific changes. And so now I want to hit those patch note specific changes. And I just want to touch on one thing here, just in terms of like maps. You know, they've like all the usual stuff in here, but they did remove and add in some maps. And core is being added. Waste pool, for what that's worth, but core is being added, and toxic sewer is not being removed. So like this is pretty great news for Blight fans, of which I am one. Also, I just noticed like, you know, Dunes is not being removed. Jungle Valley's not being removed. So a lot of people's favorite areas. Mesa also not being removed. My personal favorite map, I think. Yeah, a lot of maps that people really like, including myself, are not being removed. And a couple that I like Core and Iceberg, are being added back in. So I'm kind of happy about that. One other thing that I'm not sure about and is a bit of a concern is that crafting recipes that were from unveiling items are like now being added into the Atlas. They're just going to be like right next to the boss room in a lot of boss fights. And they said specifically that a lot of the Katarina specific, like Katarina's uniques, will not be added into the core drop pool. And I don't know if that means that the +2 support gems modifier, the veiled modifier, is, I don't know if that's like special enough to be worthy of being assigned to Katarina's unique still, or if that is going to be available or not. But that's been kind of a core component of making a proper Toxic Rainbow. In fact, if I can just pull up like, you know, Toxic Rain Path of Building, standard, best in slot, Toxic Rainbow is going to have +1 level of Socketed Gems, Chaos Dot, increase Chaos Dot, increase attack speed. Those are all real explicit mods on it. And then it's going to have, multi-mod, +2 level of Socketed Support Gems, and crafted Chaos Dot multi. So if that +2 level of Socketed Support Gems is no longer available to craft onto items, that's actually a pretty big hit to Toxic Rain. Like, I can just remove that and show. That's like 13% less damage from your Toxic Rain. It won't affect your Caustic Arrow if you're doing kind of a standard setup, or if you're doing like a Mana Forged Arrow setup. It won't affect any of that, but it's kind of a big hit. So, that is something that may be an issue or may not. There is some other stuff you could do, like you could try and craft a bow that has like the +2 to level of Socketed Bow Gems and +1 to level of Socketed Gems. It's quite a lot more involved to get attack speed on that and then still get like Chaos Dot multi onto that, but it is technically possible to do that. It might work out, and I think ultimately the difference here, if I just add that number in, +2 to level of Socketed Bow Gems, I think the damage loss winds up being like 2% as opposed to the +2 to level of Socketed Support Gems, but it is quite a lot more work to get a real, like a GG bow in that situation. Even if you're not losing massive amounts of damage, it is more expensive, more time consuming, whatever. Another really nice change that's being added in here is that all of the things that cause mechanics to show up in your maps, either like the Atlas passive skills that, like, I don't know, add strong boxes or add blight or something, now also increase the chance of getting scarabs of that type. And the same goes with the Keurig modifier, the like crafted modifier on your map device. In that case, yeah, I just searched to it. Here you have a 50% increased chance to get scarabs for that kind of content. Also for Strongbox Enjoyers, Ambush is going to be 3 Chaos Orbs in the coming league. So nice and cheap, going to be real easy to just spam run Strongboxes. I think that's going to be... I think everybody's going to be really enjoying all of these changes. I think that's going to be like a real, just seen as a very positive set of changes across the board. I know there's a lot of other changes up here, a lot, but I really want to hit on some of these skill changes because I think there is, like I said right in the intro, I think there's kind of a big meta shift happening, and I think it can kind of go a lot of different ways. There are a lot of skills being changed. One thing I will point out here is that Animate Guardian is no longer going to like nuke your items when they die. You won't be able to resummon it in that area, but if you have an extra 6 link sitting around, or 5 link, whatever, you can absolutely run an Animate Guardian and actually have it be pretty strong and useful. That does mean more gear that you have to maintain, but like it does seem like everybody might wind up running an Animated Guardian unless they're, unless they're playing like a bow build where they're using 2 separate 6 links and actually making full use of them. So in terms of some of these skills that are getting buffed, there's a lot of stuff in here like Blade Blast and like Blade Flurry and stuff where the base skill was already pretty bad. I don't know that this is really gonna move things up. But then there is one particular archetype that I really love that I think is definitely getting a very significant buff, and that would be Chaos Dot Caster. So we're talking like basically the old ED Contagion, but like all of the skills around that, with the exception of Bane. Regular Bane is actually not getting a buff. Bane of Condemnation is, but regular Bane is not getting a buff. That's okay. Blight is actually getting about a 20% buff here. It's going from like 421 to 351, 20% buff on the like base damage of it. Contagion also is getting like about a 20% increase on the base damage. So this is an increase to the base skill damage. So I don't know that this is necessarily going to be enough to like make these totally become the meta, but I do think, worth pointing out just some more of these skills in here, like Essence Drain also getting about a 20% damage increase. Same with Essence Drain of Desperation and Wickedness. Soul Rend also on that table of skills that are getting like about a 20% base damage increase. Soul Rend and Soul Rend of the Spiral were actually pretty decent in the right setup, like a cast while channeling setup. They actually worked pretty well. I think these could wind up being pretty good. Another thing that really stuck out to me among all of this list of skills that are getting buffed was Cyclone actually got a pretty decent damage increase. Like if we just look at the difference in damage here, it's like, 111 was the high end up to has been buffed up to now like 125, so 125 divided by 111, about a 12% damage increase for Cyclone, but it also has some more quality of life baked into it. As you level the gem up, you get the less movement speed bonus that you used to just get from quality. You would get like essentially, instead of the baseline of 30% less move speed, you would go down to 20% less move speed if you qualityed the gem up. But in the like, first character or whatever, you're not going to be able to afford to do that like on a league start. But then that quality's also been changed to provide increased AoE, and then the baseline increased AoE is also getting like a 5% bump, so you're going to get basically like 20% increased AoE on a fully leveled and qualityed up gem, as opposed to the old of 10. And then the move speed is still the same, then the damage is up by about 12%. Basically what I'm saying is I think Cyclone might be back, Cyclone Slayer might be back, and certainly Slayer has not been nerfed directly in any significant way, so I think that's pretty good news for Cyclone Slayer enjoyers. Cyclone of Tumult also is just, I think, looking a lot better. Higher attack speed, baseline, still getting about that 12% damage increase. The mana cost is being reduced. That's one mana cost reduction might not seem like a lot, but for a channeled skill like Cyclone, that's actually pretty good. It also has a max of 5 stages, so previously it was 6, so it's a little bit faster to charge up a Cyclone of Tumult, but then you get more attack speed per stage, so you get 25% more per stage, so 125 as opposed to 120 before, and then, more area of effect again, so it charges up. The Cyclone of Tumult playstyle is like a little bit less ramp up, just generally, I think, better. They're both, I think, potentially pretty good skills. I think there is a version of Cyclone where you do like an Impale Cyclone that could be really, really good. I definitely have to play around with that at some point during the league. I'm definitely very excited about doing that. It's like a champion. Gonna kind of get to that in a moment. Also, just a special like honorable mention to Death Aura, Death's Oath. Personal favorite. I've always liked this more than Righteous Fire. Death's Oath Occultist. It's worse. I just like it more. 25% damage increase. Still bad. Still a huge fan though. All right. So in terms of nerfs, the first thing that got nerfed, Frostblades, 30% less damage from the projectiles. Frostblades of Catabasis got, I think this is about a 40% damage nerf to Frostblades of Catabasis. Pretty substantial for a skill that was very good, and definitely, if it hadn't been nerfed, would have just slotted right in to where Lightning Strike was. So I'm glad that they did this, but obviously, if you're a big Frostblade of Catabasis fan, then you're probably not feeling great about that. Lightning Strike, 50% less damage with hits and ailments on the projectiles, 50% less on Lightning Strike of arcing as well. Pretty substantial nerf on both of those fronts. They as we can kind of see between Frostblades, Lightning Strike, and then Molten Strike down here, also getting 60% less damage with hits and ailments on the projectiles rather than 50. Molten Strike of the Zenith getting the same thing. They're really emphasizing that these are strikes, melee skills, and then the projectile damage that they do on top of that is like a little bit of extra. Honestly, I still think that this is not as hard of a nerf as I thought it would be. Like, they didn't nerf the base damage at all. They didn't nerf the attack speed. They didn't nerf the damage scaling on the melee hit, quote unquote melee hit. They didn't nerf, I don't know, like the mana cost. Like, there were a lot of vectors for nerfing this that actually didn't get applied, and I'm kind of surprised about. Also, Molten Strike of the Zenith being only 600% more damage with hits and ailments on that 5th attack means, like, if you average that out across 5 attacks at 800%, it's like 160% more damage with this skill. Dropping it down to 600, it's like 120. Pretty big nerf, about 40% less damage with Molten Strike of the Zenith over the course of time. Power Siphon has gotten a pretty big revamp in terms of the way it's working here. I mean, like, functionally it's still the same, right? But the amount of added damage is massively reduced. It was cut basically by about 33%, but it has a much higher attack speed. So what this does is the Power Siphon Locust Mine build just does like 2/3 the damage that it did before. So in my thinking, it kind of isn't very good. It had a ton of extra damage. Like, I mean, that build was so strong before, but I think this is enough to probably bring that down into being like a you know, if it was an S tier build before, it's like a B minus tier build, C tier build now. And then on the other hand, because of the massive increase to attack speed, if you want to actually play self-cast Power Siphon where you're, I don't know, attacking enemies with a wand, this would basically still work pretty well. But like as a like mind skill or trap skill or some sort of triggered thing, I know some people were trying Power Siphon totems. Maybe that could work with the attack speed compensating, but yeah, I don't know. I think that any sort of Power Siphon miner seems like it's toast now, and that's okay by me. On the subject of dot builds, Reap also got about a 20% damage buff. I don't really think that Reap is going to be like rocketing up in popularity, but that is like yet another dot build that got a pretty substantial buff. Then there were two changes here that kind of surprised me. The first was Spellslinger getting a pretty big buff. Spellslinger is now just 20% mana reservation straight up. I think that's pretty nice. I think there was another change in here somewhere as well. Spellslinger. That, yeah, here it is. The Wand Passive Mastery that did like Unnerve on hit now is 25% increased mana reservation efficiency with Spellslinger. Cool. So they are trying to make Spellslinger like useful again, usable again. I think this might have actually done it, bumping it down from like, you know, 25% down to 20 and then giving more mana reservation efficiency on top of that. Might actually be an option. Not really anything I was ever super in love with before, but it is a cool idea. Then Splitting Steel, totally dead, right? Splitting Steel has basically been punished for the crimes of Lightning Strike Trickster. Projectiles can no longer return. It now does like 15% more damage, but because it can't return, because the projectiles can't return, you're essentially losing like 40% damage. So this is just a hard nerf. And unfortunately, yeah, it's time to say bye-bye to Splitting Steel. And, you know, as the first line here indicates, it won't be coming back. Now, all of the golems got a big buff. You know, I'm not going to use these in any of the builds that I'm playing, but like if you are going to play an Elementalist, there is potential for these to be really, really good if you wanted to play an Elementalist build and really take advantage of a lot of these golem buffs. I have played that in the past and really liked it. It's just not something I'm like looking to league start. Then finally, the last two things that really stuck out to me were that Vortex got about a 20% damage baseline, or actually no, effectiveness of added damage increase, which is like kind of surprising. It also got, I think, about a 20%, 15% maybe base damage increase. So Vortex actually seems like it might be pretty strong in the coming patch. And then Winter Orb also got a pretty decent damage increase as well. So I think like Cold Spellcaster, Cold Channeling, Cold Dot, maybe back on the menu, but I noticed that Creeping Frost did not get a buff, so maybe not. Definitely something to play around with for people who really like that sort of play style, but I was always more like Chaos Bow damage build centric, and Toxic Rain and Caustic Arrow never got touched. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. You know, they're basically the same as they were. Now, there were some support gem changes. The main thing in supports that really changed in my mind is that Archmage got a pretty small nerf. You know, it goes up to 16% of unreserved max mana as added lightning damage. I really thought that number could have been cut like in half, and you know, it probably still, it probably wouldn't be all that great if it really did get cut in half. But it's still very strong, I think, having only gotten, you know, like a couple percent nerf. Yeah, I guess like a 15% nerf there. Like, you know, whatever. Arcane Surge, though, got a pretty substantial buff. Arcane Surge now, just a baseline. Arcane Surge is 20% cast speed instead of 10, and it gives you a lot more spell damage while you have Arcane Surge active. So very strong, pretty good buff to Hierophant. I think that self-casting Hierophants might be in pretty good shape in the coming patch. All right, so I'm not going to go over every single one of these Ascendancy changes. I did play Berserker as my league starter last league. I really enjoyed it, but I'm definitely not going to do it again. They removed Blitz, which really, I think, made some people very unhappy. You know, it makes like 30% of your life leech instant, but that's very different from Blitz, which gave you like super, super high attack speed increase. The Defy Pain, the basically like built-in Defiance of Destiny, is an interesting concept. I like the idea between these two of Berserker being like tanky, but also like taking a lot of damage. you know, thanks to like Aspect of Carnage, but then having other stuff that like makes it tanky. I don't really think that this is exactly the way to make that work. I'm sure there are going to be some really good Berserker builds, but I would be surprised if Berserker's like the meta build. Champion, on the other hand, I think might be looking like the meta. It's going to be tanky as hell going into the next league. So Fortitude, in the past, Fortitude, this node here now, in the past, it used to be over here, you know, they're flip-flopped, and it gave you 20 fortification and then Unstoppable Hero, instead of being this, like, allies have fortification equal to yours, this crappy bonus. It was, like, 20% attacks, but you know what? Actually, I will just pull up a new version here and just go back to, like, 3.23, and then we can just look at it together. Here it is, 20% attack speed while fortified, 500 armor and evasion while fortified, can't be stunned while fortified. Pretty amazing set of bonuses. So the way that they're going to make it work here is that it'll grant 3% more armor and evasion per fortification above 20 and 3% increased attack speed per fortification above 20. So by default, you know, you're going to have the 20 fortification from Fortitude. They'll obviously be flip-flopped. But then you can come over here. Actually, let me convert back to 3.25. Here we go. So you can come over here and take these 4 nodes here, 4 points here, and get 3 small passives that each give 1 max fortification, and then 3 from Steadfast. That's 6, and that'll put you at 26. And so just by coming over here and taking this Steadfast wheel and doing absolutely nothing else, you're going to get 18% more armor and evasion rating and 18% increased attack speed out of this. Now, you're not getting stun immunity, unfortunately, but you are getting like 18% more armor and evasion rating is quite a lot, and 18% increased attack speed isn't bad either. There are some other things you can do to get fortification. I think the best option really is to craft the max fortification while focused modifier. This is like a chest or body armor suffix crafted option. I mean, technically you could do like a veiled version, which is 10. But 7 is kind of your maximum as a crafted mod. Problem with that is focus is like 4 seconds of uptime and 8 seconds of downtime, so it's only up like a third of the time, but still that would put you going from 26 fortification up to 33. That's 33% damage reduction from all hits during that time. It's also, I guess, like a bunch of life regen, you know, from Steadfast. That's cool. But then more importantly, it would be 39% armor and evasion rating, and I guess the same amount, 39% increased attack speed. That's pretty huge. And then there's also the Celestial Brace, which is a unique from Uber Exarch, so not anything you're going to have like on day 1 of a league. But it gives 1 to 10 max fortification. It also has some other bonuses, 1% attack speed per fortification. A lot of armor for some gloves, melee hits from strikes, fortify, who cares about that? But that in combination with everything else, you can get potentially like 36 max fortification all the time, potentially up to 43% max fortification during focus. So we're talking about, even if we ignore using focus, because that is pretty annoying, 36, 16 times 3 is like 48% more armor and evasion and increased attack speed, and then you're also getting 36% increased attack speed from Celestial Brace as well. And then again, also like the 36% damage reduction from hits that stacks with armor, that stacks with your resistances, that stacks with your block chance if you're using a shield. Like, that all seems pretty good. So I think there's potential there for Champion to be a really, really strong Ascendancy in terms of tankiness, and then just based on the attack speed alone, I think it can do enough damage to make things like work. There are also some other good notable skills, like Worthy Foe now has Taunt on hit. Worthy Foe is this skill right here. Enemies taunted by you take 20% increased damage and can't evade attacks. Taunt lasts for like 3 seconds on hit, so by default it's pretty easy to maintain that taunt, especially, you know, if you're playing a build that hits fairly quickly, like Cyclone or something. I think that could work pretty well. I don't know that this is necessarily the direction you want to go compared to some of the other options in here, like First to Strike, Last to Fall, or Master of Metal if you are playing an Impale and physical damage build, but it's definitely something you could do. Take like Fortified, Fortitude, Unstoppable Hero, Master of Metal, and Worthy Foe. I think that could be like a Ascendancy setup for a Cyclone build, potentially. Something I'm going to be thinking about in the coming days. Conqueror, this skill that gave you the taunt on hit and the reduced damage taken if you've taunted recently, like that's being replaced with like some banner related stuff. I'm not doing anything with banners in any of the builds that I've like been thinking about, so I don't think that would really do much for me. They're not taking inspirational away, so like that's fine, right? It's fine. It's whatever. Other than that, the main thing I really noticed and thought like, oh, that's interesting was that Trickster is getting like a moderate nerf to their damage bonus from Polymath and a modest, I would say medium to small nerf on Escape Artist in terms of the amount of evasion rating and energy shield that they get out of this bonus right here. The amount of evasion ratings going down by like 20%, which isn't nothing, but it's not an insane amount. And then about 25% less evasion rating, or I'm sorry, 25% less of energy shield coming out of Escape Artist. Still a pretty good node. Honestly, still a pretty good Ascendancy. I still think Trickster is like very, very usable, considering how strong it was in the previous patch. You know, the most popular Ascendancy in the game. I think it's still in pretty good shape. All right, so this is my like super in-game Toxic Rain Pathfinder build. I haven't updated this at all since patch 3.25. This is like the whole guide from before, and I'll put it in the description. This was Toxic Rain Pathfinder. You know, I've played Toxic Rain Trickster as well. I've actually played it just again in the last couple of days here, thinking about like, hey, you know, what if Trickster doesn't get nerfed super hard, which it didn't. I was thinking about playing Toxic Rain Champion for the same reason. What if Champion gets buffed? I played all three of these Ascendancies as Toxic. I mean, obviously I played Toxic Rain Pathfinder a bunch, but I played Champion and Trickster quite a lot in the past as well. Of the three, Champion was always my favorite because I always found it to be just outrageously tanky. And I think there's a real possibility that Toxic Rain Champion might be coming back in a big bad way with Fortitude and Unstoppable Hero, making you super tanky and giving you a lot of attack speed. And then the ability to build into like evasion and energy shield, or evasion and armor, not energy shield. That really is the issue with trying to play that as a champion build, is that your int requirements are pretty tough to satisfy as a champion. You're pretty stupid. So that is a little bit difficult, but there's a lot going on here that's really good. You're able to get like a lot of value out of that fortified 2-point branch, or whatever, 4-point branch, but 2 notable branch. And then first to strike, last to fall, just giving you adrenaline is like a really good defensive lifeline. And then worthy foe, you know, you're taunting on hit, which you're not hitting that often, but you're hitting often enough that you're going to be having this up pretty much all the time against any enemy you fight. The evade doesn't matter. But the 20% increased damage taken by enemies matters, so that's an option. Inspirational is just always good. You do kind of run a lot of auras if you can help it, and getting 30% increased of auras is also pretty good. So I think Champion might be back in the menu. Still feel like Pathfinder is the best all-around option, and I think Trickster probably just lost its spot as the like super tank guy to Champion because of that. However, I think that Champion is probably leaning more, at least in my mind, leaning more toward like Cyclone builds, where you would be really leaning on the Impale, or maybe like Shield Crush or Shield Throw builds for the same reason. Really leaning on Impale, basically taking the old Splitting Steel Champion that I've played in the past, that I've really, really enjoyed now that that skill is very dead, and just transitioning out of pretty much anything Splitting Steel related, you know, steel related, and just doing that as like Shield Throw or Shield Crush, and then kind of adjusting accordingly if you're doing like Shield Crush or something like that, not doing anything related to projectiles. And then there is a potential, because of Worthy Foe having that like, you know, taunt on hit and being able to like not have enemies capable of evading your attacks, maybe you just drop out anything related to accuracy. That frees up a lot of like space in your gearing to not worry about accuracy or chance to hit, and just allows you to build even tankier, even harder, like just be really hard to kill, really lean in on perseverance, giving you massive increased attack damage based on having, you know, like right now in this character was like day 1 Garbanzo gear, but if you can get your evasion and armor rating up into the like 40-50k range each, you know, that puts you in pretty good shape defensively, but then also getting a lot of damage out of perseverance as well. This is all stuff I'm definitely looking forward to playing with throughout the coming league. I don't know if it's going to be league starter or not, something I'm going to be figuring out pretty much over the weekend. I'm going to be figuring out, do I want a Toxic Rain league start? Do I want it to be Pathfinder? Do I want it to be champion? Or do I want to go with some other skill as a champion? And yeah, I'm just going to kind of figure things out as I go. There were a couple of other changes coming in the passive skill tree that people might have glossed over, and that would be the Elemental Mastery that gave you 25% chances to treat monster resistances as inverted is now only 15. It's a pretty substantial nerf to a very popular mastery. And then the Leech passive mastery that gave 10% of Leech's instance now only going to be 5. Again, very, very popular. Pretty big nerf to a wide range of builds. Definitely something people are going to have to be prepared for. Both of these getting nerfed and being part of like a lot of the elemental builds that people really like to play, I have to say is kind of an indirect buff to some of the builds that can't take advantage of these, like Toxic Rain, or like a lot of just pure physical damage builds, like, I don't know, physical damage Cyclone, like Impale Cyclone, that kind of thing. All right, so that's kind of it for where I'm at on the patch notes. Definitely leaning Toxic Rain, Pathfinder at the moment. Patch 3.26 looks sick. I'm glad we're back into the normal swing of a new patch every 4 months. That's every 4 months for each game, so it's really new stuff to do every 2 months between PoE 1 and PoE 2, which is amazing. I'm finally living in the future I've always dreamed of. I'm going to spend the next week thinking about builds to play at League Start. I do want to do Toxic Rain. I'm worried about that Veiled mod change, though. Not having the +2 level of support gems on the Toxic Rainbow could be pretty painful. I also want to play around with Spectral Shield Throw, or maybe Shield Crush Champion, maybe Cyclone Champion even. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of potential to go a bunch of different ways. I'm really not sure which way I'm leaning at this point. I just don't know. Anyways, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching and get hyped. Bye.